What happens when satire meets politics in a record-breaking election? Welcome to the 2026 Clacton by-election. Hi, I'm Leah, and I'm excited to dive into this quirky political tale.
And I'm Garrett, ready to explore this wild election story with you.
Today we're unpacking the 2026 Clacton by-election, a political circus with novelty candidates, a boycott by major parties, and a ballot paper so long it broke records.
I once voted in an election where the ballot was so long it felt like I was reading a novella. Clacton's ballot took that feeling and cranked it up. It was the largest ever used in a UK parliamentary contest, and it even cost about 4 times as much to print as usual. That's pretty cool, right?
Let's open the book on this. First, a quick definition. A by-election is a special election that fills a seat in between general elections. In the UK, if an MP leaves mid-term, you get a by-election. And here the MP was Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader who resigned and immediately stood again.
Right, and Reform UK is the right-of-centre populist party that grew out of the Brexit party. Farage is its figurehead. In Clacton, the big twist was that 34 candidates jumped in, breaking the national record. Meanwhile, the major parties, Labour, the Conservatives, the Liberal Democrats, and the Greens, decided not to contest. Imagine a sports tournament where the top teams refuse to play. The field opens up for newcomers and underdogs to shine, or at least to be very loud.
Okay, here's where we begin on the setting. Clacton, on the Essex coast, has a strong history with right-wing populism. It's estimated that about 73% of voters there backed Leave in the 2016 EU referendum. Demographically, it has lower than average household income and high home ownership. Analysts often say that combination can make messages about sovereignty, immigration, and anti-establishment themes land more easily.
So the trigger. On the 7th of July 2026, Nigel Farage announced he would vacate his seat and fight a by-election. He framed it as people versus the establishment, and he denied any wrongdoing tied to investigations into his finances. One headline item was a reported £5 million payment from Christopher Harburn, a businessman with links to aviation and crypto. Banks reportedly filed a suspicious activity report, which is basically a formal flag to the National Crime Agency when a transaction looks unusual.
And a tiny bit of parliamentary trivia. Because MPs cannot just resign, the Chancellor Rachel Reeves appointed Farage to an old ceremonial office, steward and bailiff of the Manor of Northstead. That's the legal workaround that lets an MP leave the Commons. Then, the writ of election, which is the official order to hold a vote, was moved on 9th of July, setting polling day for 13th of August.
Now, enter Count Binface, a satirical novelty candidate who runs in a sci-fi mask and leans into absurdist promises. He quickly became the main challenger because, well, the traditional challengers stayed home. He styled himself as a unity candidate. Translation, if you were anti-Farage and wanted a single focal point, he wanted to be that focus.
So why did the big parties boycott in the first place?
Different reasons and some shared optics. Labour called the whole situation pathetic. The Greens said it was a vehicle for Farage's personal ambitions. And Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch said it was Farage's fake by-election. Strategically, none of them wanted to validate the frame that this was a grand referendum on Farage, and they didn't want to burn resources in a seat structurally favorable to him. Later, Badenoch said her party would contest any second by-election, trying to cap the perception that they would always stand aside.
Once that boycott landed, the media dynamic went sideways in a fascinating way. 34 candidates made the ballot paper enormous. Election administrators warned the paper would be unusually long. Ian Davidson, CEO of Tendring District Council, said that some counting tables were shorter than the ballot paper, so they had to double tables just to sort and verify votes. Even folding and issuing ballots slowed down, which is such a practical image of a chaotic race.
Logistics bled into budgets. The local council said the by-election cost roughly £200,000 to £250,000, higher than normal because of printing, staffing, security, and all that paper. Reform UK offered to pay the bill, but the ministry responsible clarified that elections must be funded with public money only. In other words, you cannot underwrite an election with party cash. It has to stay independent on paper and in principle.
Meanwhile, Binface caught internet lightning. He raised over £15,000 in one day, largely small donations. Dale Vince, the green energy industrialist who donates to Labour and the Greens, even offered to help fund the campaign. Carol Vorderman, the TV presenter, told Clacton's voters to support him. And Mr. C, who fronted the 1992 group The Shaman, re-recorded Ebenezer Good with new Binface lyrics. It went viral. Humor became a mobilizer.
The stunts kept coming. A supporter flew a light aircraft from Earl's Colne Airfield and traced a GPS flight path in the shape of a bin off the Essex coast. Binface canvassers wore dustbin costumes with the slogan, "Clean up Clacton." A vintage Union Jack Jaguar, very Austin Powers, rolled around town. On the eve of the vote, they projected slogans onto a Martello tower that's shaped a bit like a bin on the seafront. It was meme-friendly, and with the majors gone, that kind of spectacle filled the vacuum.
He also published a 20-pledge manifesto on 27th of July that fused satire with pointed critique. One proposal was to bar MPs who resign mid-parliament from recontesting the resulting by-election, a jab at Farage's tactic. Another line promised not to accept £5 million gifts from crypto-billionaires on Earth, which riffed on the Harburn story while playing up his extraterrestrial persona. Locally, he talked about regenerating Walton Pier and, very cheekily, moving Parliament to the village of Wheely during Restoration.
And there were plenty of other candidates, too. William Clouston, who leads the Social Democratic Party, stood. Lawrence Fox, the actor who leads the Reclaim Party, jumped in and tried to claim space to Farage's right. Kai Stevens ran for the British Democratic Party, a fringe far-right group, and got into a disputed spat with Clacton Pier security over a banner and alleged pyrotechnics, which the party denied. Plus, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, a long-running satire outfit, even fielded 3 candidates. It was a full carnival.
Polling and commentary were split on what it all meant. Ipsos reported nationwide that about a third of people preferred a Binface win to about a fifth for Farage, and that roughly 74% wanted the standards investigation to continue. Survation found that a majority of respondents thought the by-election was designed to distract from investigations. At the local level, a Survation constituency poll still had Farage well ahead, somewhere in the 70s, with Binface consolidating protest votes in the 20s.
Election Day, 13th August, ran from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. Turnout ended up at 44.4%, which is mid-range for a summer by-election with unusual dynamics. When the results dropped in the early hours, Farage won with about 63.3%, 22,239 votes. Count Binface finished second on 26.9%, 9,455 votes. The other 32 candidates split the remaining votes and all lost their deposits, which is the fee you forfeit if you do not reach a minimum share.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Farage did not attend his own count or the declaration. He said there were concerns about intimidation and disruption, and Reform U claimed that Essex police advised him not to go because of a credible threat. Essex police publicly stated they had advised no candidate to stay away. That contradiction was a flashpoint. Historically, the last time a by-election winner skipped their declaration was Bobby Sands in 1981, which made this absence stand out.
The morning after, the parliamentary standards investigation resumed. It had paused when he resigned, because you cannot investigate a non-MP under those rules. The lines of inquiry included the reported Harborne payment, possible undeclared gifts in kind linked to George Cottrell, who is a British financier with a 2017 U.S. wire fraud conviction, plus some crypto-related lobbying and property declarations. Farage said his legal advice indicated he did not need to declare that payment, and that's where the unresolved piece still hangs.
Let's get to the heart of the open question. Was he required to declare the £5 million? I think transparency in political funding matters. Even the appearance of opacity erodes trust. If bankers file a suspicious activity report, which is their legal mechanism to say something looks off, then the sunlight test should be strong here. Just tell the public exactly what the money was for, and how it interacts with the rules.
I hear that. I also think it is fair to note his position. His lawyers said he did not need to declare it under the specific parliamentary rules. If that reading is correct, then he might be in technical compliance, even if the optics are rough. The real fix might be rule clarity. If the gray area is too big, Parliament should tighten the standards code so big private transfers, loans, or gifts are clearly reportable.
That's close to the heart of it. There's the legal lane, and then there's the legitimacy lane. In a seat like Clacton, where voters lean heavily pro-Brexit and toward Reform UK's message, he was always likely to be insulated from the fallout locally. But nationally, Ipsos and Survation both picked up a vibe that people wanted the scrutiny to continue. So even if he wins the letter of the law today, the spirit of accountability still asks for more daylight. Why not just over-disclose and remove the question mark?
That's a solid point, and it loops back to narrative control. He tried to make it people versus the establishment, but because major parties sat it out, the comparison on stage was between him and a satirist. That can blunt an outsider brand. It looks more like a spectacle than a reckoning. Lord Hayward, a conservative polling specialist, even warned that turnout, margin, and protest performance would be the key optics. Binface's 26.9% is a loud protest.
Pop culture made its mark too. Mr. C's remix of Ebenezer Good became the campaign's soundtrack for a moment. And the Austin Powers-style Union Jack Jaguar, plus the beachfront projections, knitted the satire into visual culture. It is politics as shared meme, which, for better or worse, can mobilize people who would otherwise shrug at a mid-August vote.
Counterfactual time. What if the major parties had stood? I think the coverage would have shifted to policy contrasts and the standards case more than stunts. Binface would still have been there, but he would not have been the primary anti-Farage vessel. Tactical votes would split across a Labour candidate, a Conservative, maybe a Green, maybe a Lib Dem. That would probably reduce his percentage and narrow Farage's share a bit.
I agree, and I think the tone would have been more sober. A Labour contender would have framed the race around accountability. A Conservative contender under Kemi Badenoch would have tried to puncture Farage's outsider claim from the right. Media oxygen would be split 3 or 4 ways, leaving less room for a novelty campaign to own the calendar. The ballot would still be long, maybe not record-breaking, and the count would run faster because fewer micro-campaigns would feel compelled to enter just for attention. So, big picture. Clacton delivered a clear local verdict for Farage, but also a historic protest vote for satire, plus a resumption of the standards probe. It is one of those elections that will be remembered as much for the circus as for the scoreline.
Stay curious. This one shows how rules, narratives, and even memes can shape the field. Keep exploring. There is always another layer to puzzle out.